Tom, we are just recently back from the Cultural Connection tour. It was difficult to say goodbye to our friends and our newfound friends. So the purpose of this audio today is to reconnect with those who contributed so much to the success of this tour and to share with the MBT global family their work and their projects. I reached out to some of the Auckland group to get their comments on your workshop and MBT science and to find out what they've been up to since we left. A very special lady we were privileged to meet and have at our workshop is McQueenie Ruth Ty. McQueenie is a former lecturer at a teacher's college, and the academic agenda was not quite her thing. She always seemed to be looking for the light in the eyes of the students. For her, she wanted a deeper, richer experience. She now teaches something called Rich Earth Oratory, which is more spiritual and more in connection with nature. She loves your science, by the way, and the implications of your new experiments. She was a real inspiration at the Auckland workshop. We were honored to be able to speak with her there and speak with her before the workshop. One thing she brought to light that you speak about a lot is to do with experience. And I found this on her Facebook post called Go Beyond the Clutter. Over the past year, experiences have helped me to simplify my life more. Trust builds trust, honor builds honor, integrity builds integrity. I am much more mindful that I have my own personal perceptions that arise out of my own personal experiences. If they're not my experiences, then I'm just an observer, and my story about the observation is just that, my story. It's not my truth or experience. I'm constantly checking my heart, my mind, my actions, my responses, my reflections to see where joy is missing or where it is in abundance. Some of my experiences resonate and I connect. Some of my experiences disturb and I disconnect. When I do connect, the essence of humility grows my heart. My path becomes clear and I move beyond the clutter. I'm reaching out to all to say, go beyond the clutter. Would you comment on her statement?
Well, yes, that does sound very much like what I've said many times, and that is that if it's not your experience, it can't be your truth. And she says all it can be is just your observation. Yeah, and I generally say that if it's not your experience, then it's somebody else's truth and not yours. You haven't experienced it. You can have the choice to believe that somebody else's experience was accurate or not, because if it's not your experience, then you will never know whether that other person is relaying an accurate experience, or one that they really had, or one that they imagined, or one that they just heard about from somebody else. It's hard to tell if it's not yours. It could be almost anything. So you have a choice there just to believe it or not believe it. But if it's your experience, then that's different. If it's your experience, particularly if that's a carefully thought out and carefully experienced experience, not your experience while you've been drinking too much beer or something like that, but if it's a sober, well thought out experience, then it's yours. To deny that was your experience basically is to deny your own consciousness that you had the experience. Now you may deny that it didn't mean anything, or that you made it up, that it wasn't a valid experience, but then that's your choice to decide whether your experiences are meaningful or not meaningful, but at least it's yours, and then you get to make that decision. So yes, that sounds very familiar to me as a concept.
It's very interesting that she really loves your science. I posted recently on my Facebook page that your comments on virtual reality, and she was very enthusiastic about that. In particular, the comment where you said, when this paradigm shift occurs, when this acceptance of virtual reality occurs, there will be an uproar. The challenge will be in the transition that it creates.
Yes, of course. That's the way it is with all paradigm shifts that are major. The real challenge is in that transition from old paradigm to new paradigm. And how do you make that transition? You know, those transitions can be long and slow and painful, like the paradigm of the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't just about farming before that. It was mainly an agrarian society. And there were artisans that did their own work, but we didn't have manufacturing really in those days. Everything was kind of hand done by individuals. There was that kind of manufacturing, but the Industrial Revolution entered into great efficiencies for the production and distribution of goods, and that changed everything. It has churned on for 300 or 400 years, depending whenever you decide to draw the point where the Industrial Revolution really started. But it's hundreds of years old, and just now, some of us that were in the front end of that Industrial Revolution are just getting to the next big thing, the next big paradigm shift, which is the information revolution. So how we meet that, what we do with it, is entirely up to us. That transition is what's important. Unfortunately, that Industrial Revolution ushered in a lot of good things. Certainly, we all like all the products and nifty gadgets that we have now that are a result of that, but it also introduced a lot of self-centeredness, a lot of greed, a lot of fear came with it. At the same time, a lot of abuse. And then we dealt with that abuse slowly. We passed laws and became more aware of the abuse, and it started to tame that Industrial Revolution to something that was not quite so abusive as it was to begin with. We got through the robber baron phase of our economic systems and went on to do some really wonderful things with it, but still there were and still are many abuses of that economic system that take advantage of people, that prey on people, that manipulate people. And other places that got to the Industrial Revolution later rather than sooner, they're still in the middle of it. They're still in the manufacturing business. China would be a good example. They're kind of the world's big manufacturer now. And they won't stay in it nearly as long as we did. They will progress from that to information work, to knowledge work, to information revolution as well at the same time. So as their society becomes more middle class, I guess, the success of their manufacturing will produce a lot of wealth in China, which hopefully will spread some to more people, start up a middle class, and then they will begin to move into knowledge work and into information systems work. And who's going to be the next big country to be the manufacturer of the world? Well, who knows? But I suspect China has quite a few more decades before it lets go of that. It would have to be another country with low wages, which is what makes China so efficient in producing things, is that they pay very low wages because of the nature of their economy and their history. So they can produce things cheaper than most anybody else. So it's just kind of the phase we had to pass through, something we had to do to get to where we are now, to have the advantages that we have now and the choices. So you can't get on to the next paradigm shift until you've dealt with the first one until you've completely kind of, I don't know, done as much with the first paradigm shift as you can and start to find its limitations. And it became limiting to us as our quality of life went up and salaries went up and everything got more expensive to produce here than elsewhere. So then we shifted to the design end rather than the manufacturing end. They call that knowledge work, as opposed to actual grinding things out. And then eventually that shifts to information times of processes. That's what design and planning do, become information processes. So that's just the nature of things. So yes, we go through all sorts of paradigm shifts in our life, not just these big social ones that I'm talking about, but we individually go through these paradigm shifts also, to where we suddenly, or it doesn't have to be suddenly, where we eventually see bigger pictures. And when we see a bigger picture, then our sense of what's important and what's not changes. And the way we approach things changes, the way we interpret the data we get changes, and then we're a different person. So that's, you can say that the growing up process is a process of paradigm shifts, where your paradigm maybe starts out at the bottom of the ladder, sort of the law of the jungle, grab what you can grab and hold on to it. And I'm big, you're small, so I get to take your stuff, that sort of thing. Do it because I can. And eventually you get a bigger and bigger picture to where that doesn't seem like the right thing to do anymore. It's not, you don't feel good doing that anymore. You're looking for something with more meaning, more significance than just bullying other people. So then you move on for, something more significant than just stuff. So it's all a series of paradigm shifts for all of us as we grow up.
Well, thank you, Tom. And thank you, McQueenie, for your beautiful and inspirational presence at our workshop. Another special guest at the workshop we were very fortunate to have was Dr. Robin Kelly. He's an MD, an author, a lecturer, and a musician. His health practice incorporates Eastern and Western mind and body philosophies. Robin says of your workshop, "I loved Tom's workshop and his empowering message. This validates each person's individual experience and reminds us that behind the apparent fragmented chaos of our lives lies a universal field of consciousness we can all access through acts of love and cooperation. The relevance of this to human health care is immense. In particular, I have now regularly recommended Tom's videos to university students struggling with meaning, purpose, and direction in their lives." Dr. Kelly is also involved in an upcoming documentary film called Surviving the Narcissism Epidemic. He will be a narrator and an interviewer. So this project will be on crowdfunding, so please look for it and give some support if you can. He is a musician who has just released his 5th album at Manuka Studios in Orewa. I hope I said that right. Titled Orewa Heartbeat. For a sample, listen to Truth Seeker at soundcloud.com. Dr. Kelly has won the 2011 USA Best Books Award for Science Book of the Year for his book, The Human Antenna. And subsequently, he has written The Human Hologram. These books are premised upon what if our physical bodies were perpetually being formed upon an invisible field of information? And what if this field was one vital and integral part of the same field underlying the physical structure of our universe, holding all the information and wisdom of its past and present? And what if, by being a knowing contributor to this field, each of us could create a blissful and peaceful future, not only for ourselves and our planet, but for our whole universe? We are indeed, at the deepest level of our being, truly holographic. Do you have a comment on any of that?
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a comment on that, and that is that I don't use the word holographic because
Okay.
that's, I think, not as good a metaphor as other metaphors that you might use, like virtual reality. But it obviously gets to the same thing, where he's talking about it's all information, and the information comes from source and so on. So it all turns out to be very similar. It's just when people start trying to ascribe causality, or how does it work, or where does it come from, then they reach for metaphors that explain that. And some people have found the metaphor holograph to fill that bill for them. That's a way for them to explain how it works. Well, my viewpoint, that's not a very good metaphor, because it doesn't really work like a holograph. It's not an optical process at all. It's just information. It's more of a computer science process than it is an optics process. And holography is an optical science. So I don't have any quibble though with the ideas. People use different metaphors everywhere. All kinds of people talk about the same things with different metaphors. And if you get hung up on metaphors, you just waste your time and everybody else's time. Let the metaphors go. People can use whatever metaphor suits them, and helps them make explanations. And the listener just has to realize they're just metaphors, and people have different metaphors for things. So I have no problem at all with those sorts of statements, even though they talk about holography, and I don't. I just see that as somebody else's metaphor for basically the same thing that I'm saying. So it's not a problem at all. Metaphors are just there to help people communicate. And there's probably a certain number of people that holography communicates to them very well.
Well, he says, what if you could create a blissful and peaceful future, not only for ourselves and our planet, but for the whole universe? And you, of course, propose that our intent drives everything, and that you can create a blissful and peaceful
But
future.
I really wouldn't talk about it for the whole universe, because to me, being a physicist, the universe is a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is all the stars and planets and empty space that we know of in our physical virtual reality.
Consciousness.
And that physical virtual reality is just a virtual reality. It's a very small subset. So but a lot of people use universe to mean as big as it gets. The big thing, the source, the universe,
Everything.
everything.
Yeah.
I don't use that metaphor, just because to me a universe is this virtual reality. It's not a very big thing. It's not everything. I would make the same statements though, but instead of the universe, I'd say the source, the larger consciousness system. So I hear that a lot though. People saying, "Oh, I'm using my intent to program the universe." Well, that doesn't really, to me, ring as a good metaphor that you're doing anything to the universe. The universe is just the virtual reality. But the larger consciousness system, now that's the big thing. And that's my metaphor for the big thing and the source.
The next person who really helped us a lot in Auckland is Nick Story. Quite an amazing story, actually. He had been helping us for a year and a half before we actually arrived in Auckland. He began a meetup group to spark interest in your My Big Toe science. And the group has grown to 85 people now who regularly meet and discuss the concepts in My Big Toe. Nick says, everyone enjoyed the event. He felt the cultural aspects were met at the seminar, as a wide range of cultures were present, and it was also good to have Maori content in the makeup of the event with McQueenie's contribution. Our group has met twice since the seminar, and we will soon be working together in projects exploring remote viewing and healing, which is very nice. I know you're doing the applied precognition project in June in Las Vegas.
That's a conference that's going on, a remote viewing conference.
So that'll be in June. And also, based on one of the videos that we did on YouTube, I invite Auckland and others to the outpouring to watch that video on YouTube. And my Facebook page contains something called the outpouring, which is a healing and caring connection that we can use to connect and to have healing requests and outpouring requests. So thank you, Nick, for all the work you've done, and good luck with your projects exploring remote viewing and healing. One of our other special guests was Dr. Homa Hirantner, and Dr. Hirantner has studied holistic practices and energy healing, and she's compiling those to write a book. And what she says about the workshop is, for me personally, MBT and Tom meant a lot. There are many scientists and sites on YouTube and online who offer similar subjects, but for some reason, meeting Tom was meant to be. I felt an urge to contact Tom after Nick's story suggested that we contact him concerning this workshop. I felt as if I had known Tom and I was supposed to help any way I could. It all felt normal, and you all felt to be friends that I knew for a long time. I felt very comfortable with Tom and later with you all. I miss you already. And we miss you too, Homa. And for me in particular, I promised myself to take Tom's advice and build my website, to share my knowledge and experiences on a larger scale, write my books, which are in the form of notes, and hopefully publish them. In short, do what I am meant to do. So you can say for me, it was a turning point. And I know that we got to speak with her later on, and she was a very sweet lady, and certainly an honored guest. She gave us a little talk at the beginning of the workshop, so we're looking forward to that. We were honored to have another Maori guest, Erica Burke. She was reluctant to come, and she would like to say thank you for coming to New Zealand, as I enjoyed meeting Tom and everyone very much. I must say I did not want to come to the seminar at first, as I'm quite a private person and shy away from big gatherings and socializing. If it wasn't for Lake, he's one of our other helpers, and my husband's insistence, I would have missed a wonderful experience. Tom is definitely a wonder to behold, and he has inspired Lake and myself to work towards setting up an awareness center here in New Zealand. Erica and Lake are now working on a center to help people attain their highest potential. And Erica is very gifted. So all the best of luck, Erica, with your plans for your center. I understand you are planning to launch a Kickstart campaign to help you build your center, and let us know how we can help you promote that. We'll be happy to. And it was a pleasure to meet you. The planned name for the center is Maori MBT Awareness Center, and that's a great name. Lake and Erica worked on that name for a while. Lake made a very interesting comment about the Industrial Revolution versus the Digital Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, things were consumed and gone, and the Digital Revolution, things seem to live on. And you made a comment on that that's indicative of the information age. You comment on that?
Well, the information age has just gotten started. It's not, we don't actually know what the information age is going to be like yet, because it's just begun. We're in the first, the very first stages of that revolution taking place. But one of the main technologies, one of the main things to occur as a part of the information age is the internet. You see, the internet doesn't really produce products. That's not its point. It's not part of the Industrial Revolution. It's not manufacturing anything. It's not making or selling or creating products. It creates value by sharing information. That's how the value is created, not in making products. So it's a different way of looking at the world, but there's value in information. Now, I guess it does help sell products in the sense that the internet can also be a storefront, can go with sales, but it's much, much bigger than that. The internet as a storefront is just a tiny little application of the internet. If you think of all of the internet and take it as a whole, the fact that it sells things is not a big part of it, but it sells things more efficiently than can be done otherwise. That's why internet prices tend to be your lower prices. That's why a lot of people shop the internet. The problems there, of course, people are afraid of unscrupulous players in that game because they're in a different country or far off, and how do you collect, or how do you but once you gain some confidence in the system, it really works very well and is a very efficient process. So what's this information revolution going to look like? Well, I think look how much the internet's changed over the last decade. We started with an internet, and probably the first big thing was email. And we don't even think so much as the internet as email, but that was the first big thing. Once we had this network of computers where information could be passed around, the first thing was email. Well, that was huge. That was a way that people could communicate with each other in seconds rather than weeks, and quickly rather than having to sit and write or type out letters and put stamps on them and walk them down to the post office and wait for that delivery, which was reasonably quick if it was local, but not too quick if it was in another country, the other side of the world. It might take a month before somebody gets your mail. So suddenly communications among people got a lot easier. And as the internet has evolved, it's just continued in that same theme of making communications between people easier and easier. It's a grand communications device and information sharing device. Well, the importance to that's obvious is that as the internet grows and becomes more and more pervasive and more common, so that eventually, it'll be that 90% of all the people on the planet will have access. Now that's probably not true. Now it's probably 30 or 40 or 50%, I don't know, but it's growing. Initially it was only 2 or 3%, so it's growing. But as it gets more widely spread, its ability to shrink the world gets greater and greater, so that we all can interact with each other. We can see what's going on in lands far away. We always have now the official story, and then there's the story on the internet that was taken by people with their cameras and their videos who happened to be in the vicinity that really got a picture of exactly what did go on, you see. So it just changes everything, the way we do business. It makes this information available to hundreds of millions of people very quickly. And that will change the way we think, the way we work, our economies. Everything will change about that. This idea that in order to get an education, you have to go to an institution someplace and get accepted and go through all the hoops and things to do that, and do a particular curriculum that's been set out, and there's this big machine, education machine, that you have to get into and run through that process. The internet can deliver courses and information and material to people without any of that structure. And they eventually will do it in such a way that you also can be credentialed that way, which they do that some now, with distance learning and so on by institutions that are credentialed. We're starting that, but eventually education won't be, 2,000 kids crammed in a building, all being told to sit down and be quiet. It'll change that completely. So every facet of our life is going to be remade and redone with this information age that we're coming to. And it's hard to tell just, exactly what it'll look like versus how long, but give it another 3 or 4 or 5 decades, or maybe to the end of the 21st century, who knows. But I suspect the world will be a very different place in just a century. Whereas before, a millennia went by and the world hardly changed at all. The cities were just a little bigger, that there really wasn't a lot of change. So change is coming much more quickly in the information age. The world is getting smaller and smaller. The smaller it gets, the more likely we are to be cooperative with each other, to care about each other. You see, if it can reduce the world to the size of a family, well, that has more hope of caring, more hope of support, or even say a small tribe. Of course, we all know there are dysfunctional families, so that's not necessarily, going to take us to the promised land, but it gets us closer. It moves us into a space where cooperation and caring is more likely, more possible, and more supported than it ever was before. That's just beginning to influence people now. So again, we're just in the very beginning stages of this internet. I'm sure there are probably books and books written on all the possibilities and things are likely to happen and that sort of thing that I don't know about and I've never read, but some of it's just obvious, and that's some of the things that I'm talking about. So this switch from the Industrial Revolution being the prime mover of social systems in the world to the information age being the prime mover of social systems in the world is going to be immense, and it will make changes that we can't even imagine, and it's going to make them quickly. We don't have to wait for 2 or 3 millennia, or 400 or 500 years, I guess, that the Industrial Revolution took. If you go back to the printing press or whatever that some people say was what started it, but it's going to be rather dramatic and quick compared to what we've seen in the past. That's what they say. It's on internet time now. So everything's on internet time, which means it takes place a lot more quickly. It'll change science. The idea that science is done in institutions that are very insular, with a lot of beliefs and a lot of hurdles to have to get over, and in situations that are probably, it's fair to say, that are very political. Form is just as important as content. Has to be in the right form and presented the right way. All of that will start to dissipate and erode as the internet passes information around. And it's not only going to be found in a journal that costs $500 a year to get access to it. It'll be available to anybody, quickly, all over the world. Things, just lots of little things like that. All together, they're going to make a huge difference in our future. And particularly if this information age delivers to us the concept of virtual reality. Then not only will all the things that are going to change anyway change, but hopefully a lot of our attitudes and the high entropy beings that we are will begin to change. And that's really gets to the problem of our ills in our social environments. It's that low quality of consciousness is what creates all the symptoms that we don't like. The greed, the selfishness, that sort of thing is all created by the low quality of consciousness, and we have a chance to make a big step there. So change is coming, and quickly.
That is really good. And we have a small example of coming together here with this Cultural Connection Tour and continuing it. we consider the people who have been to the workshops and who've helped us so much as family. And the internet does make it possible to keep in contact and to promote and to
the
inspire.
internet made it possible for it even to happen.
Yes.
You see, without the internet, this tour would have been impossible. Without the internet, my big toe would have been impossible. There'd be me, 3 or 4 people in my family, and 10 others that would have ever heard of it, you see. But it went up on a web page and sat there, and as a few people read it, they told other people. And that's why, it's available. And that's why there've been, thousands and thousands of people who have had access to that material. It's just because there's an internet. And when you put up on your website about a cultural connection tour, well, how could you have done that, without a website, without an internet? And I would guess that 99% of all the people that were in any of the workshops and any of the places that I did in this cultural connection tour got there because of some connection through the internet. They got emails. They got, they went to websites. They found out because of the information transfer going on in this new information age. So just that my big toe exists, that it is getting more and more widely spread around, that there's enough people interested to fund a tour to go around the world to talk to people in places where normally I wouldn't go because it's too expensive to go there. All of this happened just because there's an internet. That was the enabling technology. See, none of this goes on. And that's true not only of me, but of 1,000 other people who are putting out information. The internet has a lot of good information.
Just Google my big toe. Just Google theory of everything, and there comes Tom Campbell up the top of the page. Well, another person we were very fortunate to meet up with is someone you've been talking about for years, whose computer science work supports MBT science, and that's Dr. Brian Whitworth. We were very fortunate to meet him and his lovely wife, and he came to the workshop. Can you explain a little bit about what his computer science work?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Brian and I have been exchanging emails for probably almost 5 years. Brian was just getting his very first book out about his big toe, I guess. We exchanged some emails about it. We got in touch with each other, and I read some of his early drafts, and he read my books, and so we've been kind of chatting back and forth for a long time. And what Brian has done in a very short, this doesn't do it justice. This is a very short description, and it's my description. This is my metaphors here. But what Brian has done, as far as how it fits into MBT, is that he has developed a very simple process, computer process, computational process that derives the rule set. Where does this rule set come from? Did this larger conscious system just sit down and start writing down equations to see if it could come up with a rule set? No, it probably didn't work like that. Some little rule set was probably made up, and you see how that would work. Probably didn't work very well. So it gets changed, and something works better, and it gets changed. And according to Brian, if you just start with a few simple assumptions, not very many, one of his basic assumptions is a thing he calls a Planck process, which is basically a process that takes place until it continues to process until it gets overloaded. And when it gets overloaded, it resets. So it's just some real simple computer science ideas and concepts put together. And just from those ideas, he's been able to generate most of the rule set, most of the science, most of the laws, the rules, if you will, of our virtual reality. You see? So he takes these simple ideas in computer science and says, all right, let's work with those and see how we can generate physics just from these simple computer science concepts. And he's been successful with that. So he started out with things like light, and then he did mass and force and energy and gravity. Now he's working on gravity and all of these fundamental things in physics. He's showing how those things can be derived out of simple computer science processes. You see? Well, how did a larger consciousness system that's basically nothing but computer science processes generate this rule set? Well, Brian points out a way that it could be done. A very simple, basic way that a rule set, an initial rule set, could have been evolved to help give structure to this new virtual reality that was being produced as an entropy reduction trainer inside of the larger consciousness system. And that, I think, is wonderful work. It's really good, and it makes a very plausible case for helping us understand how the larger consciousness system ended up with the rule set that created this virtual reality. It falls out of computer science.
That is huge.
Processes. So that's a good thing. Now Brian, I say these are my metaphors, and I'm giving this description. Brian doesn't necessarily subscribe to that same bigger picture. He sees that he's just trying to describe the physical world, the quote physical unquote world. He's trying to describe our universe and how it works based on these simple computer processes, and he's being very successful at it. It's me that takes it and says, oh, well, that's just making a good case for how the larger conscious system could have created the rule set. So he didn't do it in order to show how the larger conscious system could create a rule set. That's not where Brian is. Brian's just trying to come up with the physical laws that run this place, the rule set, based on a few simple assumptions in simple computer processes, and he's become very successful at it. He's doing a wonderful job. So that's how it kind of fits in. And Brian and I have, again, we've exchanged things. We've had some discussions, and sometimes we just agree to disagree on the way we see the world. But basically, I think Brian's a great guy, and he's doing some really good work that, in my mind, fills in an important spot in MBT theory, which is where did this rule set come from? How did that get evolved? Well, there's a simple way that evolves almost all of it. It's just a few simple processes, you see. So that makes it so it's not like larger conscious system sits down at its desk and says, all right, what are we going to have here? Oh, let's see, F equals MA. All right, let's write that one down, Then GMM over R squared, gravity, let's write that one down. It's not like you have to piecemeal get all the pieces of physics together and write them down like out of nowhere, out of the blue sky. You just have to start with a couple of processes and the whole thing generates itself. You see, now that's more understandable than of how the system could have created a rule set.
Well, it's efficient, and it could suggest that that's how the virtual reality was created.
Sure, that's how the rule set that creates the virtual reality was created.
The rule set.
So, and it's simple. It meets Occam's razor. It's very elegant, very simple, and you generate a whole lot of things that are accurate pieces of physics just out of these, small number of assumptions that go with it. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. Kind of eyeball to eyeball meeting rather than email to email meeting. But and I got to meet his lovely wife, and we had dinner at his house. And it was all in all a very a real good time of being able to socialize in the flesh.
Yes,
with somebody that you've been a pen pal with, for a long time. So
yes, it was wonderful.
That was neat. Brian's a very smart guy. He has a lot of other things he does besides this. He's got bona fides not only in computer science but also in psychology. and he's written a wonderful book about defining, I don't know what his term is, but defining good user-friendly software. How do you go about making software that people really can use? In other words, getting rid of all the stuff that's not user-friendly, the stuff that breaks, the stuff that is laborious, the stuff that's inefficient. And he lays it all out. And if everybody writing software could read Brian's book, we'd have a lot better software quality in the world today. So Brian does a lot of things. He's not just one-dimensional in his research and in his interests. He's published some books, some articles about improving the academic process. What's wrong with it, and things that could help fix it. So he's got his fingers into 4 or 5 bowls, and he does very good work in all of them.
He's quite talented, and it was really fun to meet him after all those years of you talking about him in your workshops.
Yeah.
I do want to mention Sean Walla is also one of the people in Auckland who was
Sean was just a lovely guy.
Wonderful.
He helped us any way he could. Anything we needed, Sean
It was incredible.
Delivered it. He says, well, how are we going to get from here to there? And he'd say, oh, take my car. It's like, well, how are you going to get there? He says, oh, I'll walk. It's that sort of thing. Sean was just beautiful.
He was an extraordinary, loving, giving person. He kind of lives the love is the answer 24/7. And
he does. He even came to the airport to say goodbye.
Yes, that's right. He did. It was above and beyond. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. This ends our Cultural Connection Continues interview, and we're going to be going on to Sydney next, so we'll introduce you to some of the people there in the next series, and we will be...
Will not introduce me to.
Or we will...
We'll talk about.
We will talk about.
Some of the people we met
in Sydney and how wonderful they were. So stay tuned for Sydney.